So we will move straight on now to our second paper, and that's by John Bryden and his colleague Nicholas Luena. How does Facebook influence Parliament? So over to you.
So my name is John Bryden. I'm currently the Executive Director at the Observatory of Social Media here at Indiana University. I recently moved to Indiana from Royal Holloway. This is some work I'm doing with Nicholas Loynes, who's based at Newspeak House in London and the University of Manchester. So I just want to give a bit of background. So we're seeing how social media are really very much changing political discourse at the moment, and the way communication channels have changed from traditional media channels, from newspapers and TV to, I mean, at the moment, we're seeing TikTok having influences on our political discourse. And there's a big concern. There is a growing body of literature where we're seeing how sensational and false information seems to be spreading much further and much quicker on these social media, due to the sort of its organic nature and a number of other vulnerabilities. At the same time, we're seeing how members of Parliament have all got Twitter accounts and are all obviously being influenced by social media and using social media for their own purposes. And so what we're interested in is what's going on in Parliament, and how are people being affected by their exposure to social media? And is there impacts on popularity of information, and what's the motivations behind decisions made by politicians and what they choose to talk about in Parliament. So this is going to be quite a quantitative study, so hold on tight, because there's even an equation in this. So let's dig in a bit further. Just want to talk a bit about what the current threats are from social media. And these are quite general social level ones, but they're all applicable to Parliament. We've got sort of manipulation from automation, which is like automated accounts such as social bots. We've got coordinated campaigns from people sitting in farms, tweeting things together at the same time to make sure certain tweets get amplified. There are protests going on social media. We're seeing currently there's somebody being investigated for spreading a lot of misinformation on Twitter at a very high level in the US Congress at the moment. A lot of misleading information is also being spread on Twitter. There's polarization, echo chambers, people talking within groups and not sharing information. And we've got Facebook and Twitter have particular algorithms which are influencing the way information is spread on social media. So there's a lot of negative impacts, potential negative impacts from social media. But on the flip side of this, we've got this idea that MPs have social media accounts and anyone can tweet their MP, and it's making things a lot more open as well. So this is not a one-way, a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And we're seeing what we thought about was that there's this distinction between this kind of bottom-up approach where citizens are leading our politicians, and social media can be enabling that, versus this top-down idea where the politicians and the old media and the establishment are leading the topics and the agenda. So we're going to look at how these different factors influence influence Parliament. So a little bit about research design. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because the talk is fairly brief today. We're just going to look at a way of, basically what's going to happen is that people are sharing URLs on Facebook, and we have access to those data, and we want to see if we can quantify the effect that the sharing of URLs on Facebook is influencing parliamentary discourse. So I'm slightly going to get through this quite quickly. We've got 3 data sets here. We've got URLs shared on Facebook within the UK. So these work as quite a nice proxy of, if you share a URL, it says quite a lot about you, what your preferences are, what you're looking at the time, what your attitudes are. And we can also look at how people react to URLs with likes and dislikes. They can say they're angry about whatever's information about that. And we've collected around 300,000 of these URLs, and we have data on how many people have liked them and disliked them, and how many people shared them, clicked them, and so forth. On top of that, we've also studied MPs and their tweets, and we've looked at, we're more interested in is, because MPs' tweets gives a sense of their personal platforms, and they're giving MPs a direct communication channel to everybody. We've got 836 accounts from Twitter, and we've also looking at what MPs are saying in Parliament. So we've got the Hansard record of MPs' behaviour in Parliament. So these 3 data sets are giving us a public view, a sort of personal view of the MPs, and a public view, a sort of parliamentary view of the MPs, which we're making a distinction between. And we're going to use those 2 information streams in different ways, or those 3 information streams in different ways. Just to look at a simple case study, there's this study of Harry Dingley, who's a boy who needs medical marijuana to treat epilepsy, and he's been in the news again recently because he's now no longer able to get medical marijuana from the European Union. Back in 2018, the campaign first came out, and I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer, but we've got the first mentions in Parliament, which is the orange line on panel A. And that happened a few days after the first mentions in the media, but that happened after a big Facebook post happened. So the black dots on this are Facebook URLs, which we talked about earlier. And I think here we've got the count here is like there were 50 speeches in Parliament on this top of the orange peak, and we've got 20-something speeches, 20-something media articles, and then 80% of the maximum number of Facebook post views happened like a few days before. And then later on in panel B, what actually happened was Parliament made a statement about that. So we had questions in Parliament in panel A, and then we had a statement in Parliament in panel B, and that was actually preceded by a Daily Mail article, which was very popular on Twitter. And then the next day there was a very popular, the most popular, that's 100%, article that was kind of celebrating the fact that the government were doing something about this case. So we've got this pattern with the Facebook article, an article being widely shared on Facebook, capturing public attention, leading media to get excited, and then Parliament responding. And I've looked at this for child refugees as well and found similar results. What is quite difficult to do is actually find these cases, I mean, we can think them up and we can investigate them one by one. And what we wanted to do was come up with a method that's broader and perhaps even able to find these particular cases. So I don't know who's familiar with the Wombles and who isn't, but I came up with an example of a URL. So I'll just talk you through. This is our method for looking at language influence. So the key thing here that we're interested in is that MPs have certain language that they use in Parliament. And what we're interested in is how that language changes over time, and does a URL shared on Facebook make a difference? And we've got this idea of these circles are websites being shared on Facebook, and we're interested in one particular URL in this case. We're going to go through each one by one, but we'll just take one here. And this happens to be, say, an article about the Wombles, which were 1980s children's TV characters. And in the example here, the MPs who were previously talking about Wonder Woman and Ninja Turtles changed their language and started talking about the Wombles after this URL. And we've also got some data showing that this was liked and disliked so much on Facebook. So we've got this idea of URLs being shared on Facebook influencing language in Parliament, and we can measure that. So we've got this language similarity, which is this key metric, which is the textual similarity. We can sort of count the number of words. It's very mathematical, and you can say how similar is the language before the URL to the URL, and how similar is the language after the URL to the URL, which is this equation. And there's similarity afterwards minus the similarity before. We call that the language influence. Given this language influence metric that we've defined, we're then able to actually look at measure overall the Facebook URLs. If a Facebook URL has more likes or more shares or more reactions of some kind or another, say anger, so forth, does that influence language more often? That's the key hypothesis here.
About 2 minutes left, John, 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. So we're using that metric, and we've got some early results on that. We focused on questions in the Commons and the Lords. We looked for language influence against a number of likes, shares, reactions, and we did find a small positive relationship between these sharing, but it was highly significant in the case where there were shares without clicks, shares on Facebook, angry reactions on Facebook, and comments on Facebook. Whereas it was only quite significant, and there was a difference between these two levels with the views and like reactions, and not significant at all for other reactions. So these kind of work as a control, and together these things seem to indicate, or do actually indicate, that the Commons seem to be more influenced by these kind of sensational posts that have clickbaity headlines that are shared without clicks, of people clicking angry on Facebook, commenting a lot and sharing a lot, whereas not the ones that people are liking a lot. And we did not find a correlation in the Lords, which shows this is going on in the Commons, but not the Lords. So we also want to, I have to rush through these, but now we've got these early results, we want to incorporate Twitter, we want to look at the language changes of individual tweets of politicians. We found that there's a small correlation with, like, if a URL is shared more on Facebook, then it's more likely that an MP will tweet that URL. We're also going to split these things up into topics. We're going to do topic analysis on this So we can look at perhaps certain topics are more influential on Ps than others. We're also going to look at different types of domains. This is a standard method in computational social science. You can look at these low credibility domains and say, are those more influential than high credibility domains? So, I mean, that would be particularly worrying. So there are a few discussion points about this, but I'm going to probably come back to this at some point because we're running out of time. But we're going to be doing a sprint on this in the next week or two. So we're very interested in further guidance. I just wanted to say thank you to all the project partners as well. Facebook Social Sciences Research Council and Harvard helped us with the data, and Royal Holloway, Indiana, and Newspeak House have helped on the project. Thank you very much.